If you want to guarantee your own misery, make sure to blame racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, whatever phobias or isms that you may conjure up in that moment. Make sure to cling on to those ideas and to never let them go. If you want to promise that you live a life of stuckness, where you never actually move forward, where you never do the things that you have a calling to do, you never live out your purpose, but instead you remain broke, dusty, and disgusting, continue to blame the isms for the circumstances of your life. Now, my personal journey is one where I came from being like, your typical young black man, being stuck on that Democratic plantation, believing that my life was dictated by the white man and the systems of white supremacy that were hanging over my head, that were the reason as to why I could not succeed. Now, of course, I was young and I was naive, and I did not understand that this ideology was simply a construct of my own mind. Well, at least not just my own mind. There was the mass media whose sole intention it was to remind me that I am oppressed, that I basically am the same as an enslaved person back in 1864, right? Instead of a young black man with more opportunities at fingertips than anybody else in history. But nevertheless, we had movements such as BLM during maybe 2015, 2016. Post Obama was when I really started seeing this kind of intentional movement and effort back into the race conversation. It was as if it has just popped out of nowhere overnight, right? It came along with a lot of the woke ideologies, a lot of the far left Marxist ideologies, this victim complex, and this hierarchy of victimhood, etc. And it's not to say it didn't exist before. Like, I do remember the 1%ers versus the 99%ers. We had that entire like the protests that were going on. What was it called? Occupy Wall Street. That's what it was. Occupy Wall Street was the first true depiction I saw of these people on campus. UC Berkeley, which is a very expensive university in the Bay Area, and they were protesting against the wealthy 1%. And it confused me. I was a kid when I first saw that. I was deeply confused because they're on this multi-billion-dollar campus with all the luxuries and privileges afforded to them by this society, and yet they're the ones who are crying out about injustices and inequalities within finance. So at that point in my life, I didn't understand. I was still a kid, right? I had actually just freshly moved into the United States. Years go by, and the 8 years of Obama, right? I got swept up in all of that. Obviously, if you were black, there was an Obama bug. They pushed Obama like he was your own personal granddaddy, right? Like he was a family member. He was a relative. I remember my homeboy's grandmama, who was like a grandmama to myself. She had like a picture of Jesus and she had a picture of Obama. I can't make this up. She had a picture of Jesus and Obama next to each other. Of course, Jesus was a little higher, but Obama was right there, right? He was literally the black messiah. And obviously we were all caught up in the hype. We were younger. We didn't really understand. But what we knew is we were angrier and angrier. And we felt as if we needed to be angry because, the system of oppression and of injustice. Now, granted, our day-to-day lives had not changed much. There was no Jim Crow that had all of a sudden popped, like Jim Crow 2.0 that came out of nowhere. There was no necessary thing that was happening, but instead the media was pushing stories. And it finally hit this critical mass when obviously I think George Floyd might have been the most impactful one. But before that, there was a young man, Trayvon Martin, and they pushed the entire race narrative with that story, right? It was all about race. It was a perfect storm. As the media, and now I'm realizing with my own research backwards, is to say the media has oftentimes done this, clinging on to these kind of race wars in order to fulfill whatever sort of agenda they had. Just like with Tawana Browley, I actually did an entire video on the Tawana Browley situation that made Al Sharpton who he is today. It was a complete hoax, just like the Juicy Smollett situation. But nevertheless, we find ourselves fast forwarded into Trayvon Martin territory, and this young, black boy who did nothing besides put his hoodie on, gets executed for being black. That's the story that we were told. That's the story that was repeated. And so the anger, the animosity, the frustration, the resentment, it started to build up in us. And we started to view ourselves as being enemies to the people that we call homeboys, that we were thick as thieves with just weeks prior or months prior. All of a sudden, I found myself feeling some type of way. And, as this kind of built up, and now we're getting cases such as, black men are being gunned down in these streets. Every single day they're being hunted in these streets. And we're thinking to ourselves, obviously, this is real. We are not only just given over to, the propaganda of a lifetime of this democratic plantation, but we're also now given over to the day in, day out messaging that we're getting. And, our parents are afraid. Everybody around you is having that same type of energy, especially in the Bay Area where I was raised, where it is the hub of wokeness. It is, the white guilt is manufactured in the Bay Area at scale. It is created in bulk. It is like a Costco of white guilt in the Bay Area. And so I was also surrounded by white folks who had the same sentiments, who saw me as somebody to pity. And it wasn't until 2015, 2016, when I started to see how the media, who I stopped trusting a little later in my teen years and then early in my 20s. I really had this contrarian sort of spirit about me, saying I can't trust the media. I was not trusting big pharma and things of that nature. I was having that sort of awakening, but it wasn't the full conscious awakening that I'm now experiencing or have experienced since 2016, 2018-ish. But that was a time where obviously Donald Trump, DJT, Donald Jacques Trump, first ran for president. And I saw the media switch on somebody who they used to deem as like a media darling, a sweetheart of the establishment. They would give him free press like it was nothing, and good press. All of a sudden, overnight, they turn on him at a flip of a switch. They're saying all these stories. They're saying, obviously I didn't know they were twisting his character at the time. I just knew something was sus about it. And so that's when I started to do my own independent research. YouTube was now officially a thing. People were really putting up content, and, Twitter was a thing, etc. But I relied on just watching, few minutes of debates or whatever it was to fully get context. Because I didn't like the guy like most other people because I was told not to. And so I started to dive into that and, oh, he's such a racist. He's a racist. And I hear the thing he actually says. I think one of the first ones was, oh, the Mexicans, they're all rapists and unalivers. And then to actually hear of what he actually said, of there's people coming across the border who are that. That was all I needed was 10 more seconds of listening to the actual clip as opposed to the edited version or the strip version in the mass media. And so that started this awakening process for me that then led back to this question of, so is racism really keeping you back? It wasn't a question of does racism exist? Of course, racism exists. It exists in every subsect of the world, in every culture at some level, where there is racial superiority and, deemed racial inferiority towards others. You go to India, there's a caste system, right? If you go into Italy and Sicily, in between the two, one is the darker, one is the lighter. One is seen as upper class, one is seen as lower class. Within the black community in America, there's colorism. You light skin, you get dogged for being light skinned. You're dark skinned, you get dogged for being dark skinned. You might actually get it worse within that context. The most people that I've heard from personally, they say they got it far worse from people who look just like them than the people who look nothing like them, than the white man or the white woman. They got it from their own. And so I really started to question, especially now looking at my life, I'm getting older. I'm having ambitions to, start a little business or whatever it was. I wanted to get into marketing. And so I started picking up these skill sets. One of my first clients was actually my barber, dope barber. He's a known barber. I'm not going to put his name out there, but he is now an official barber for a very big, major league team and things of that nature. He built his way up, and I was helping him form out content and, doing a little social media marketing, whatever it was. And he was my first paid client. And I started to deal with some of the other barbers and, again, believing, all right, black business, whatever it was. And I got screwed over a few times. When I was supposed to get paid, I wasn't getting paid. And I was thinking to myself, wow, what's going on here? I thought we're supposed to be in this together. And, it was harder and harder to do business. And eventually I just started branching out. I never had an intention to just do business with black folk, but, that was kind of the gateway in. And as I'm building my skill sets up, I eventually start to prospect different people I know, people who I know, people I was meeting on the way, and, speaking on the things that I do, the services that I provide, and getting connected. And during that time, it was still around the 2016-18 time period. I started to get, clients who were the very people I was told were the most against me. And I was having no problems with these people. They weren't questioning my price points. They were paying on time, even before time. Do you want me to pay you the extra right now before? Like, it was a joy to work with these people. These were 50, 60-year-old white men and white women who are business owners and, doing their thing, doing their best to keep their businesses afloat or to grow their businesses, and wanted to put some trust into me. And so put some money in my pocket, whatever it was. And that had me questioning even deeper to say, wait, but they're supposed to be my enemy. They're supposed to be against me. And you may listen to this and say, well, that's that white guilt kicking in. If it was, then shit, it was that. If that's what it was, it still led to profitability within my own business. Whereas on the other side, it was like pulling teeth, trying to do business, and they always having to discount and do a half deal. And, oh man, I ain't got the money right now, but if you just do X, Y, and Z, then we can build together. No. Build together. No, you need to pay for my services. And so that's when I really started to introspect in this kind of holistic way to say, okay, am I really being held back by racism? It actually doesn't seem to be the case in my situation. Start looking in the situation of some of my homeboys, the people around me. Is the reason he's still in the streets or he's still selling dope or whatever it is that racism doing that? Or is it the personal decisions that we make? Is it the personal decisions that we continue to make? Is the reason why I'm having different outcomes in my life now, because of racism? Like, when I started making healthy decisions, was that because racism disappeared all of a sudden? Or like I found a little zone, a pocket in the world where racism didn't exist but existed everywhere else for every other black person? And this is how powerful the propaganda is, folks, because when the BLM came full-fledged, the George Floyd, I believe it was like 2020, 2021, right? May, like close to the summer of 2021, we had the entire George Floyd situation. And during that period of time, I remember the media pushing that story so hard and creating so much discord between people. The one image or the one video was like it played night and day is what it felt like. It was just playing and playing and playing. And how that registers in the subconscious mind is that this thing is continuously happening over and over and over. And so we start to believe this is happening everywhere at scale, when in reality, they said there was no more than 12 black men and women who were black who were killed by white police officers. There was that many people who were shot in a neighborhood in Chicago the same year, in the same summer, overnight. And yet that was not reported on. But yet this one case, and then the next case, some time from that, was publicized, because there is a concerted effort to have us divert our attention towards one another and to see each other as enemies, as opposed to building with one another. That's the greatest fear for anybody who wants to control, quote unquote, control the population. It's like the Wizard of Oz. They have you believe that they're this big, massive, whatever it is, and you can never overcome it. But once you start looking at them, you see, man, them ain't none but some shriveled up ass folks. You go look at the shadow government within DC, the Nancy Pelosi's and Schumers and all these individuals. They are some shriveled up, you know what I mean? Like, they are human just like we are, and much more fragile, much more afraid. And they want you to believe that you cannot do for self, that you cannot build, that you cannot grow, that you cannot become more. They want you to believe that you are essentially doomed to the life that you were born into, like the caste system in India, which I believe is now something that is breaking from their own psyches. But they want that belief in the masses. If I was a dictator, I would want my population to believe that they cannot do for self, that there is this system that is over them that is so powerful that they can do nothing of it. I want them believing that, because it's easy to keep my power then. Then you won't go and build that business. You won't go in and purchase the building. You won't go and get your real estate license. You won't go and do the things that can actually get you to the next level in your life. And that's been the most perplexing thing, is like, the more I've leaned into the message of actually being of the greatest service to all people, but people who look like me, is when you get the most attacks. Like the Candace Owens and the Thomas Sowells of the world, who have a message of do for self and I believe in you, they are attacked. Yet the rapper who is telling you to go and off yourself, or is bragging in your face is going to steal your girl, that person is celebrated. The dope boy in your neighborhood who's poisoning the community is seen as a hero, while the person who's telling you to uplift yourself is being seen as the problem. That's the greatest detriment. This cultural element of the things that we celebrate, and our focus is in the wrong places. And when we have like a mind fixated on things that do not matter and things that are actually detrimental and so deeply toxic, a lot of these elements of, we have the rap culture, the drug culture, the horror culture, all of that. Yes, I said it, horror culture. When we have the celebration of these things, that becomes the detriment of the community. And it has nothing to do with racism. The only thing you might want to point racism is, yes, LBJ incentivizing welfare throughout the generations. And for one generation to the next to be relying upon big government. That's the only thing you can point to say, there's your racism that is affecting today. Even if you want to look at Ronald Reagan, the war on drugs, that definitely, the reason why there was able to be a war on drugs is because there was already that criminal element within these communities. Oh, the CIA brought the crack. The people were still indulging. They were susceptible to it because they were compromised. There was already no daddy in the household. Daddy was already in the streets or locked up. There was already a level of a disintegrated community after a few generations, after 1965, when Lyndon Baines Johnson and the Democratic Party at the time said, we're going to have these niggas voting Democrat for the next 60 years. And they created a plan through quote unquote social reform that made you reliant upon a big daddy government and big mama government. And that's what we're seeing the byproducts of now. So when we stay perpetually in the cycle of racism, we stay stuck in exactly what you were given at that point in time, that point in history. We need to wake up, folks. We need to wake up. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We need to wake up.
I used to be afraid of the dark, place unknown like a heart in their heart. I used to see my life in the bar. Now the kids unchained, every shackle is lost. 2 steps in the moonlight, 2 step in the daytime. You just know when it feel right. You got a feeling the time's not. See you through those shades that I just threw on. Through my lenses, you just can't do no wrong. I fell in love with myself again. I fell in love with myself. I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon.